The Reconquista, or the Reconquest of Al-Andalus, was the successful series of military campaigns that European Christian kingdoms waged against the Muslim kingdoms following the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula by the Umayyad Caliphate. The beginning of the Reconquista is traditionally dated to the Battle of Covadonga, circa 718 or 722, in which an Asturian army achieved the first Christian victory over the forces of the Umayyad Caliphate since the beginning of the military invasion. Its culmination came in 1492 with the fall of the Nasrid Kingdom of Granada to the Catholic monarchs. The Anglo-French Wars were a series of conflicts fought for 706 years, extending from 1109 CE until the second defeat of Napoleon in 1815. At that point, Napoleon's empire conceded to the combined strength of Europe. The Anglo-French Wars were mainly fought for control over French lands and included prominent battles such as Agincourt, Crécy, and Waterloo. Early struggles saw the successful deployment of the legendary British longbowmen, who trained to wield heavy yew longbows from a young age. However, the Anglo-French Wars also had far-reaching consequences beyond Europe, playing an essential role in forming independent colonies overseas. For example, France provided critical resources to the United States in the American Revolution of 1775. Interestingly enough, while there were many conflicts between France and England during this period, they were not continuous. Instead, there were relatively long periods of peace interspersed throughout. That sporadic frequency illustrates how dynamic the geopolitical situation was at that time, when tensions could shift from war to peace in a brief period. The Roman-Persian Wars embroiled two of the most powerful empires of the ancient world in conflict. The wars began in the mid-1st century BCE and didn't end until 628 CE, lasting a staggering 681 years. The wars began with a failed negotiation for an alliance between Mithridates II and Lucius Cornelius Sulla, followed by an invasion into Mesopotamia by Roman general Marcus Crassus in 53 BCE. During these wars, there were periods when both sides achieved significant victories over one another. Finally, Eastern Roman Emperor Heraclius and his brother Theodore managed to deliver fatal blows to the Persian Empire, and the subsequent Persian ruler successfully sued for peace. Even today, the Roman-Persian Wars are some of the longest and most influential wars in history, as technological innovations altered the world's military tactics for centuries to come. The Byzantine-Bulgarian Wars were a series of conflicts that took place for 675 years between the Eastern Roman, Byzantine Empire, and Bulgaria. The wars began when Khan Asparuh led his people, the Bulgars, across the Danube River into Byzantine territory in 680 CE and established their kingdom. Though the Bulgarian Empire and its successes posed a significant threat to Byzantium sovereignty, throughout the centuries-long conflict, both empires achieved some level of peace and security by signing treaties and long-term truces. That peace would eventually shatter under Tsar Simeon and Tsar Ivan Alexander, who were determined to expand their empire further into Byzantine lands. The last war of the series brought victory to Bulgaria in 1355 CE, ultimately leading to the Ottoman conquest, and that marked an end for both empires. The Roman-Germanic Wars were a series of conflicts that spanned 708 years, from 113 BC to 596 CE. This clash between the two civilizations resulted in the displacement of the Roman Empire and Germanic ancestral regions from the 2nd century BCE to the 10th century CE. Though there were plenty of battles and alliances over these centuries, a significant event was the 476 defeat of Romulus Augustus to Odoacer, which marked the official end of the Western Roman Empire. Over the next 120 years, Frankish and Visigoth rulers continued to dissect the Roman Empire, while engaging with Byzantine generals from eastern Rome. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars overlap with the Roman-Germanic Wars, and it is at this time that Western Rome ceased to exist, thus ending the 708-year conflict. In conclusion, the Roman-Germanic Wars lasted an unprecedented amount of time and impacted European territories. The Arab-Byzantine Wars were a series of conflicts that spanned over 4 centuries and 1 year. This long-standing animosity between the two mighty empires had many factors, including economic, geopolitical, and religious, which led to several battles until their resolution in 1050 CE. In 629 CE, Muhammad opposed the Byzantine Empire, and by 638 CE, Arab forces had conquered the previously Roman Levant, Egypt, and Persia. The Byzantines suffered more losses until the empire benefited from a resurgence in the 10th century. Through the support of Europe in the Crusades, the Byzantine Empire regained total dominance by the 1100s. Seljuk Turks replaced the threat of the Arabs by the 1050s, thus ending the Arab-Byzantine Wars. The consequences of these wars shaped the landscape in Europe and the Middle East, creating one of the most infamous grudges in human history. The Bulgarian-Serbian Wars were a series of conflicts between the Bulgarian Empire and medieval Serbian states between the 9th and 14th centuries in the Central Balkans. Before the 12th century, the Serbian states were dependent upon and strongly influenced by the dominant Balkan powers, the Bulgarian and Byzantine empires. The rulers of both those countries sought to control Serb princes to use them as allies in the Byzantine-Bulgarian Wars. The first war between Bulgarians and Serbs occurred during the reign of Persian between 839 and 842, precipitated by Byzantine diplomacy. Later, after a series of campaigns, the Bulgarian Emperor Simeon I conquered and destroyed the Serb state in 924. The Bulgarian Emperor Peter I granted formal independence to Serbia in 931 and appointed his protege Kaslav Klonimirovich as its ruler. The most powerful Serbian state of the time, that of Duklja, was again subjugated by Emperor Samuil in 998. In the 13th century, Stefan Dragutin and his brother Stefan Milutin fought against the Bulgarian governors of Belgrade and Braničevo, Darman and Kudalin, and managed to defeat them. In 1327, the emperors of Bulgaria and Byzantium signed an anti-Serbian alliance to stop Serbia's growing power, but in 1330, Bulgarian Emperor Michael III Shishman was defeated by Stefan Dekanski in the Battle of Velbasht. The Yaqui Wars were a series of armed conflicts between New Spain and its successor state, the Mexican Republic, against the Yaqui natives. The period began in 1533 and lasted until 1929. The Yaqui Wars, along with the Caste War against the Maya, were the last conflicts of the centuries-long Mexican-Indian Wars. Over the course of nearly 400 years, the Spanish and the Mexicans repeatedly launched military campaigns into Yaqui territory, which resulted in several serious battles and massacres. The Yemeni-Ottoman conflicts refer to battles between 1538 CE and 1911 CE, mostly involving the Ottoman Empire and various factions in Yemen. The Ottomans attempted to expand their imperial rule over areas in the Arabian Peninsula, explicitly targeting Yemen, thus fueling the conflict. Several successive Ottoman governors, such as Selim II and Suleiman I, led many of these engagements, resorting to military campaigns against local rulers when diplomatic negotiations were unsuccessful. These wars resulted in territorial gains for the Ottomans, leading to increased control over Yemen and parts around it. The numerous incursions throughout this period had a lasting impact on Yemeni culture and history, with both sides suffering considerable losses in terms of men and resources. Finally, in 1911, After 373 years of fighting, they reached an agreement granting autonomy to Yemen under Ottoman suzerainty until World War I broke out a few years later. The Moroccan-Portuguese conflicts lasted from 1415 CE to 1769 CE and were a series of wars and skirmishes between the Portuguese Empire and the kingdoms of Morocco. The original aim of the conflict was for Portugal to gain control over Morocco to maintain their naval supremacy in the western Mediterranean Sea. This conflict began when Portuguese forces seized Ceuta in 1415 and attempted to capture other coastal cities such as Tangier and Azamor. In response, the Moroccans fought back under numerous sultans, including Sultan Abd al-Malik, who emerged victorious against a Portuguese attack in 1578. Nevertheless, despite facing several defeats at the hands of Abd al-Malik, Portugal still managed to obtain several fortresses along the Moroccan coastline. However, King Sebastian of Portugal died in battle, and over the next 190 years, each Portuguese foothold was either abandoned or returned. This period of relative peace continued until Portugal finally withdrew its forces from Moroccan territory in 1769. The Russo-Turkish Wars were a series of 12 conflicts between the Russian Empire and the Ottoman Empire that spanned from 1568 CE to 1918 CE. During this period, the two empires fought several battles, primarily over control of religious sites in the Holy Land, access to the Black Sea, and territories in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. In 1569, the Ottoman Sultan Selimnescu attempted to push the Russians out of the lower Volga by dispatching a military expedition to Astrakhan, sparking the earliest conflict between the Ottomans and Russians. Subsequently, numerous clashes happened over areas such as Crimea, which changed hands multiple times until Russia finally annexed it in 1783. The next major conflict occurred in 1828 when Russia declared war on Turkey for its involvement in Greece's independence movement. This escalation later expanded into Romania and Bulgaria, leading to further territorial gains for Russia. Later on, during World War I, Russia joined forces with Britain against Germany and its allies, including Turkey, resulting in a decisive victory for Russia and its allies at the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, which brought an official end to all hostilities. The Arauco War was a long-running conflict between colonial Spaniards and the Mapuche people, mostly fought in the Araucanía region of Chile. The conflict began at first as a reaction to the Spanish conquerors attempting to establish cities and force Mapuches into servitude. It subsequently evolved over time into phases comprising drawn-out sieges, slave-hunting expeditions, pillaging raids, punitive expeditions, and renewed Spanish attempts to secure lost territories. Abduction of women and war rape was common on both sides. Dano-Swedish War may refer to one of multiple wars which took place between the Kingdom of Sweden and the Kingdom of Denmark, from 1450 in personal union with the Kingdom of Norway up to 1814. The 335 Years' War was an alleged state of war between the Netherlands and the Isles of Scilly, located off the southwest coast of Great Britain. It is said to have been extended by the lack of a peace treaty for 335 years without a single shot being fired, which would make it one of the world's longest wars and a bloodless war. Despite the uncertain validity of the declaration of war, and thus uncertainty about whether or not a state of war ever actually existed, peace was finally declared in 1986, bringing an end to any hypothetical war that may have been legally considered to exist. The Spanish-Moro conflict was a series of battles in the Philippines lasting several centuries. It began during the Spanish Philippines and lasted until the Spanish-American War, when Spain finally began to subjugate the Moro people after centuries of attempts to do so. Spain ultimately conquered portions of the Mindanao and Jolo Islands, and turned the Sultanate of Sulu into a protectorate, establishing geographic dominance over the region until the Spanish-American War. Moro resistance continued.